Why do I enjoy the Leadership in Flow show? Results, business results. The leaders that come on our show are so focused on achieving business results. Are they aware of the difficult business environment they're in? Yes. Are they aware of the changing needs of their staff and customers? Definitely. With these awareness, they humanize their leadership approach to build relationships for sustainable results. That is the reason I love hosting the Leadership in Flow show.
Leadership in Flow is so rich. The quiet leaders that we speak to do three things. They examine what they need to do, they experiment with new ideas and skills, and they explain with a clarity of thinking and communication. And that helps behavior change. When you have behavior change, you grow either in a personal level, as a leader, or as a business.
What do we need for 2023? I'm sure you would agree that, being in the community of business, we need business excellence. But who brings about business excellence? Business excellence requires leadership excellence. That's exactly why we're bringing you season 2 of Leadership in Flow Asia to bring the best minds who have walked the talk, practitioners who are going to share their leadership wisdom with all of us so that we all can grow together as a community. See you soon every Thursday at 6 p.m.
Hello and good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in any part of the world. How are you, Sham?
I'm good. How are you, Ashok?
Okay, so I understand you're not in Singapore, so...
Yes, so I am at a location where, Muller is with us in spirit, in kind, and also in person, but in a different part of the office. So yeah, as you can see, the background is Muller's office. So yes,
Okay, all right.
I'm in KL this week.
Nice.
And I assume it's still raining in Singapore.
Yes, it has been.
The water rabbit has hopped in.
Speaking of that, Kong Si Fa Chai to everyone who is locked into our show, listening in, right?
Yep,
all the best for the Year of the Rabbit.
Yes, and Happy Lunar New Year, everyone. I know in some parts of the world, like for example, in Malaysia and Singapore, it's Happy Chinese New Year, but in other parts of Asia, it's Happy Lunar New Year. So Happy Lunar New Year, may you have peace, joy, and happiness, and good health all year through, okay, and for many years to come. So today's show is the last episode for January. And as usual, with Leadership in Flow Asia, what we do is we summarize, we draw salient points from our guests of the month, and we connect not just the dots, but we connect it to what's the current thinking, or what are the experts saying are things that we need to pay attention to. So the theme for January is Quick Wins for Leaders, and we had 3 guests with us this month. We had Bara, who's CEO of Jetstar Asia Airways. We had Hyen, who is Chief Executive of the Children's Cancer Foundation in Singapore. And we had Chris Cummings last week, Group CEO of Wellbeing at Work World. All right. And so what Ashok and I are going to do is to pull out what to us resonated from 3 perspectives or 3 aspects. And you know that we are now talking about the aspects in terms of personal growth, leadership growth, as well as business growth. So we're going to attempt to find nuggets from each of these speakers and put them into these categories and see what comes out of it. Okay, so let's go.
Let's start.
Yes.
Go Ashok, right?
Yes. Okay, unintentional. Okay.
Okay, but it flowed in well. Thank you very much.
Okay.
You know what? It's January. I know it's the end of January. It sped so fast. And yes, our
Mm,
first speaker we had was Bara, right?
mm, mhm,
And I, I still say why I love the show, right? It's almost like reading. No, no, I won't say almost. It's like reading a leadership book every week. And
mm,
these are life practitioners, and they tell us their personal stories, their leadership stories, and also and they also leave us with ideas on how to grow business, and that's why I love this show. And that's exactly what Bara did for me, right?
mm.
I had the privilege to host him with you, right?
Yep.
Yes, and I know his key message, which was very important for the start of the year, and I think there's something all of us need to focus on. It's about make kindness our business.
Mm,
If you remember that, right? He
mhm,
started with that message, and at the end of his 1 hour odd segment, he was still banging home that message, but in different ways. You know, make kindness our business, and even showed us how we can do it in the business world. Now, what was interesting when he talked about his personal growth, which to me
mm,
was also in the space of kindness, he made a very clear distinction, and I think there's something that all of us can take away, which is a quick
mhm,
win. Right? He made a very clear distinction of having the self-awareness of what is achievement and what is fulfillment.
mm,
And I thought that
mm,
was very, very important to keep asking ourselves and having the clarity on it, right?
mm,
I know you asked him a question around how do you have an internal measurement, and I guess it is like what he said is it's a based on how you feel,
mm,
right? How
mm,
you feel, and perhaps one guiding question we can give all to our listeners, right, is to perhaps think about this answer: what is a meaningful life for you? And you can
mhm,
work on that to be able to understand whether you're feeling fulfilled in any task that you do. And he said this is a great way to find your purpose, and the outcomes that he was delivering was he was
mm,
giving back, creating value, giving back. So when
mm,
when he had the clarity of the achievement versus fulfillment, and when he was very clear why he was feeling fulfilled, he said it was like a cycle of life. I mean, that's my word, but he said so a vicious
mm,
cycle. But yeah, it was about giving back, and that's how he felt, creating value, giving back. And I think that set a very good context of starting with kindness, And I
mm,
think we have to
mm,
start with ourselves first, right?
mm,
Being able to show up and delivering on our purpose in that sense. Yeah.
mm,
So that
mm,
was one thing I took away from him, right?
mm.
I can get into the leadership flow, but do you want to add anything on the?
Karen?
Okay.
Yeah, you go ahead. You go ahead. You're in the
Okay.
flow.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm in the flow.
Mhm,
Okay. So for leadership, right? Um, Again, he gave us a quick win. He said, do a daily reflection of how you have become a better version of yourself,
mm,
right? And I thought that is a very important quick win, because he says, yeah, we're in operational mode all the time. We are never going to be perfect all the time, but it's always good to sit down and do a reflection on what did we do? Can we do this better? What did I say? Can I say this better? Right?
mm,
And he also
mm,
told us accept our imperfections.
mm,
Right? But with that awareness is then make a choice of how to grow from there. So I thought that is a
mm,
very good quick win idea for daily reflection on how you can be a better version of yourself. Yeah.
mm, mm,
uh, and the other one, okay, I know it sounds odd, I'm going to say quick win, but he said be patient in developing your pipeline of leaders,
mm,
right? And he said you got to build the confidence in people. You got to believe that people have the potential
mm,
and build the confidence and just keep building the confidence for them. And he even said, bring a support network, in that sense. And what's the outcome that he's getting? He's having engaged leaders,
mm,
and that's the beauty about that, is it? So it's about he
mm,
reflecting, doing his daily reflections. He bring patience with his leaders and providing them the support, right, to help them build themselves, you know.
mm,
And then, of course, he went into the business part of things, where he shared with us examples of where you need to be hungry, and I think this is very applicable for regardless of the size of business you're in. And he shared with us a context where in the market space, there are bigger players than Jetstar, and they had to look for how to now create value in a competitive environment. I think this is a very important thing that we can take away, right? For all businesses, right? Be hungry to create value. And yes, he's got a big landscape, but he focused on a few things, 4 important things the way I look at it. One was on-time performance, reliability, how they can retain talent, and how they can engage customers. So I think it's important in the competitive space, ask yourself which are the areas you want to focus on, where are the values you can create, and be hungry to create that value. And he shared with us about the first ones to start off with the straight to gate kiosks.
Yep.
You know, when they rolled
That's
it
right.
out in Singapore, right? He said before the big boys did it, they did it, you know, because they were hungry, because it went on back to their focus on providing on-time performance, being reliable, engaging the customers, you know. And he said, if you want to power this hunger, power it with kindness, you know, power it with kindness. And then we were like, how do you do that? And he gave us a beautiful example. He said a lot of his staff, right, what they did was they sent them to even volunteer in old age homes, right? Why? Because that creates a deeper sense of empathy when you're dealing with the elderly and all. And that reflection and that experience is what they bring back to deliver to their customers. Right? So yes, you have the hunger and the kindness, but the kindness is not just fancy words on the wall. They actually make it very experiential, you know. And I think that was a fantastic idea. And what do you have? The outcomes. The staff is bringing back the same level of empathy to the customers, you know. And he said, he even shared with us, even in certain rude situations, they demonstrated kindness. They understood why the customers were frustrated, you know. So I think that was great, you know, a great way of sharing all his 3 points. And if I think about it from the Agile Manifesto again, right? Because I always go back to the Agile Manifesto, the first value, which says very clearly it's about people and interactions over tools and processes, right? And if you think about it, kindness is the way of increasing that trust and interaction. Right? How we communicate with each other, how we support each other. And I saw that because a lot of people think Agile is about methodologies, processes, tools, and all. No. It's actually really about that human connection and interaction. Right? And I think kindness is the way to drive it. And he showed us how to do it, you know. And kindness is good and great for business. I mean, those were my quick wins, right? That I took away.
Yeah, I think what Bharat did was showed us how he makes it work in Jetstar.
That's right.
And from the context of a player that is not a big player, has 3 to 4% of the market.
That's correct.
The market. It's lean, all right, by any consideration, and yet, you know, so how did and does he make it work for Jetstar? A couple of things stood out for me.
Okay.
I'm going to go back to what you said, right? And there's overlaps. You're talking about measuring fulfillment versus, you know, ticking the boxes on your
Achievement.
performance, your achievement, right? And one of the things he said was, it's okay to feel good. It's okay to feel good. And I think that's a definition for him for fulfillment. And if you were to ask someone to think about, and if you say it's okay to feel good, what does that mean? I think that means it makes your system feel good, right? It feels good. And if you think about, if you connect that a little bit deeper, in order to move from achievement to fulfillment, it's a journey of knowing what's your purpose, right?
Yes.
Right. And at this, and it really also depends on where you are in which stage of life you are in, right? And it could be very well that at some point in your life, achievement and fulfillment are the same thing, right? Because it really depends,
true.
right? If I am starting out, I'm young, what am I looking for? I'm looking for the basic needs. I need to make sure that's met, you know, and then and that I could be equated to fulfillment. So it really is dependent on your life's journey, your career journey,
mhm.
right? In things. But I thought it was a nice way of helping us, because purpose sometimes tends to be a big word. Sometimes, so it really depends on what your purpose is. But some of us may not be able to articulate it. So
That's right.
if you're not able to use the words, then it's that feeling, that sense of feeling inside that it's okay to feel good, right? So that was one for me, and I thought that was from a personal growth perspective,
Yes,
very something to hold on to.
that's right.
Um,
That's right.
from a leadership growth perspective, I the way he builds the leadership pipeline, right?
Mhm.
And that's important as CEO, as the head of the business. That's one of the things that CEOs are looking at, right? How do I make sure the sustainability of the business is ensured? One of the ways of looking at it is, how do I make sure my leadership pipeline is a strong one, right?
Mm.
And he said two things stood out for me. One was we need to set them up for success. Now,
Yes.
what tells me about, when I hear that, to me, it means it's being okay when mistakes are made within the confines of, safety, right? Because it's an airline, right? There is a measure, there is a bandwidth in which mistakes are made, and people are okay with to do that. So there's a sense of psychological safety, right? Um,
It's true.
the other being courageous to be kind, or the courage to be kind, right? And if you think of what happened, I mean, the news, it was in the news recently last week, where Jessica Arden
Yes.
stepped down, right?
Mhm.
And I think she is a world leader, recognized by other world leaders to be someone has who has embodied and practices and demonstrates empathy, kindness as a leader, right? And
Mm.
I was reading, I think it was The Guardian, and they talked about what she did, some of the things that she did, and she was the one leader who locked down the country
Country.
with
Yep.
kindness, right? And it was one country that did not push back, either quietly or otherwise, right? And they supported her in locking down the country, right? And she did that with kindness, right? This is just one
Yes.
example. So being kind, people seem to sometimes think that it's easy or it's a nice to have.
Mhm.
I think what Bharat showed us or shared with us was that sometimes it takes courage to be kind, because at some point you have to balance kindness with of business growth, because at the end
Mm.
of it is that there's results, right? Um, the point though that he made is that kindness will bring business growth, right? It's not intuitive, but it's something for us to consider. And I think there are quite a few examples there, like as I mentioned with Arden, right?
Sure.
Yeah, so for me, I thought those were the three things that stood out as quick wins in terms of
Mhm.
personal growth, leadership growth, as well as business growth. The business growth, I think, he talked about that. It's how do we innovate? How do we have the courage to innovate and think about growing the business in a way that's different, all
Right.
right? Keeping in mind that we are lean, all
That's
right?
right. That's right.
We don't have big guns behind us, right?
Big
Once
pockets, deep
again, that
pockets.
goes
Yep. Yep.
deep pockets, right?
Mm.
With us, right? And it also alludes to me to that. Okay, we have courage, but so we're going to try things that other people didn't try. And you gave that
Mm.
example earlier on,
Mm.
of, straight to the gate boarding, right? And you're right. Jetstar did it, which was very surprising to me when it happened, since both of us are in Singapore. Because the first thing I would have thought was, why isn't Singapore Airlines doing this, right? The biggest player, they didn't do it, huh? Why is a low cost carrier doing it, right? We get
That's
this
right.
those
Yeah.
questions. So that was I thought that was interesting, uh, an interesting way of looking at innovation from the
That's true.
organization.
That's true. Yeah. And they were very
Next,
good quick win ideas.
yep, they were. Oh, they are.
Yeah.
Right. So for those of you who have not heard Bara's show when he guest episode, we have Bara on YouTube as well as Spotify. So for those of you who like to listen while you're driving or you're jogging or walking, doing your morning walks, that's something for you to do. Okay, subscribe to the Spotify podcast. Next, we had Hai Ying as our guest, and she blew Muller. Totally amazed Muller, right? Muller couldn't stop talking. I mean, she amazed me as well. But I'm just drawing on Muller because Muller is not here with us today, and I want to bring her into the show. So for Hai, for me, why don't you go? Tell us, because she's a friend of yours as well, Ashok.
Okay, so taking away from at the end of Bara's talk, right? I remember I chimed in, and this is my personal view for many years now. I've always felt that for-profit organizations can also learn from social service organizations. And vice versa, both sides can learn from each other, and I think that's what, to me, what Hyen has shown, right? Yes, she's a CEO, and she showed us how to lead the organization. And something I realized in her show, right, this is probably very reflective of who she is. She was constantly asking questions. If you think about it, if our listeners who are going to be watching the show, again, you can go back to YouTube or Spotify, right? You'll see that she's constantly been asking questions. And I term it as asking self-reflective questions with the aim to solve problems or impact others constantly. Let me give you some examples, right? Some of the quick win ideas she said was, she gives herself visual reminders of why am I doing what I'm doing, my why, right, to energize herself. So she said she takes breaks once in a while, and she goes and sees the beneficiaries, the children with cancer and all, right, to energize herself. And it all stems from that question that she keeps asking herself: why am I doing what I'm doing? And I think that was a very great idea that she had passed on to us. I think it's good for us to pause and keep asking ourselves, and get involved with the customers, or in this instance, the beneficiaries, or spend some time to really think about how your contribution is making an impact. So we need to keep energizing ourselves. So I thought that was a great idea, which also again stems from a question that she had. Now, the other one was about leadership. Now, I like the fact that she moved at different roles while she was asking this one question: what is the real problem I like to solve? Yes, she might be involved in a certain task. She knows the KPIs on the task and is being measured, but she keeps asking questions. And it's like, okay, what is the real problem? Is this solving the problem? And if not, how do I now solve it? So that's a quick win idea. A review if the current solutions are solving the real problems. And I think that was important, to keep asking, keep reflecting on that. No, don't just do a task, but really identify and say, hey, you know what? Is this making an impact? Right? The other one she came up with was about looking at your sphere of influence to impact others. Right? She said, let's be realistic about this. Yes, you may not be able to move the needles for everything, but look at where you can move the needles, and keep asking yourself, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? Right? I know. So that was another self-reflective questions, and she did say that the outcome she had was she built confidence by taking the small steps. She kind of warned us in a way, right, through her story, that you just got to watch out for your own self-limiting thoughts as you come across that. You know, you got to be very clear about what you're trying to do, and then take that small steps and move the needle slowly. But always keep asking yourself, what's my sphere of influence, and what can I do? What can I do? All right. Another quick win idea she had was this one. You were laughing towards it. I saw in the videos, right? Review current practices. How did this silly rule come about? And I thought that was fantastic. You know, why? Because it was a fun way for everyone to mock and make fun of the current thing, but at the same point of time, find creative solutions. Again, it stems from asking a question. How did this silly rule come about? Or how did this silly practice come about? You know, it's not blaming anyone. It's just trying to get to the root of the issue and then look for a solution around it. You know?
Yep.
So I that was another quick win. And another quick win she had was she's talked about fail fast, learn fast. Fail fast, learn fast. And I thought, and she gave the example of where she goes out to go and look for funding, and she tells her, hey guys, listen, don't fund me to hit the results, but also fund me to be able to make mistakes, learn, but I will share my learnings with y'all so that y'all can learn faster. Right. So that's a great thing. And again, the question that she keeps asking herself is, what can I do better? What can I do better? What can I do better? And the outcome from there was attempt small experiments to create new solutions. And if you think about that, right, that is also an agile mindset,
Yep.
right?
It is.
It's also an agile mindset. It's about doing it, taking the small steps, but being able to feel confident about the failures along the way. And towards the end, she gave all of us a very important idea, right? She talked about looking at strategies from a future back approach. And I think that is even more important today. The reason why, because we are seeing a lot of trends around the world globally, from economic trends, new economic trends, demographic trends, technology trends, environmental trends, social divide trends. We are seeing a lot of these trends, right? So with the future back approach, you're looking at where will your organization be in 3 to 5 years from now? And then working backwards and looking at what is the value you can create and what are the risks that you'll be facing along the way, right? And this is coming from a social service sector, right? And she was telling us about how to, I mean, you would think that this probably come out from an MNC, a corporate sector, but she was telling us, we got to look at the future, right? So in her space, it'd be about who are our beneficiaries, what are our beneficiaries' unmet needs, how would it be 3 years from now, and how do we work backwards and make sure we deliver the right value? What are the right values for us to grow, to deliver? So I mean, she didn't say it that way, but just by telling us about the future back approach, I was like, wow, this is fantastic, because she ended up with the key message: past success need not be repeated in the future. Just because you're successfully practicing certain things doesn't mean that it will be the same for the future. You may have to review it. And I thought that was excellent.
It's a
So
good
those were
reminder.
it's a great reminder. So those were my 5 quick wins I picked up from personal to leadership to business growth. Yeah.
Haiying is someone who's amazingly self-aware and anchored. I mean, that's to me, that is the thing that strikes me, right? If you take it from a personal growth perspective, and she talked about how for her the focus is about making myself redundant, right? When she steps into a role, it's about and that helps her think about what the next step is for her, and helps her decide, okay, it's time for me to move on. And I think that's important because we sometimes we almost have a limiting belief that we when we think of a career, how do we plan our career, right? We either don't know how to do it, or we go by whatever comes. So it's a stroke of luck, right? We happen, an opportunity lands on it, all right? So how and I used to wonder this, think about it, right? How do I think about my career plan, my career path? And for Haiying, it's about how do I, when I step into this role, what do I need to do to make this role redundant or myself redundant for
Okay.
this team or for this organization? And what does that mean? It doesn't mean that's the end for you. It means that that's the next step for me. I now move
Yes.
into my next role, right? It's time for me to leave this, which is great because you know when it's got ended, right? And to move on, right? Sometimes we tell ourselves, right, football players, right? I think it's time. Don't they know it's time for them to move on? Why are they still hanging on? You know, it's like, or famous actors or artists, right? It's like, you know, enough. I think it's time for you to move on. Music trends have changed, right? I think that gives way Haim thinks about it is a very
Okay.
interesting way of thinking about it, right? Um, so that's personal growth, right?
Mm,
Uh,
mm,
Leadership growth, what I took away from her, we talked about how do you influence? She said,
mm.
leadership is influence,
That's right.
right? And that's a very interesting perspective that you don't need authority or the backing of authority given to you in a
Mm-hmm.
leadership position to be able to influence and do the things that you perhaps want to do. You may not be successful all the time, and I think that's a misconstruct that we sometimes have, that if we are successful, therefore we are influential. Right? I think we can. If we go down that route, then we're not going to try anything, right? So for her, leadership is influence, and you can do something regardless of whether you have a leadership, a grade tag to your name or
Okay.
not, right? And your ability to work the system, knowing the system, the landscape, is
Mm-hmm.
what makes you a leader, not so much the position that's given to you, right? Yeah, so for me, that was the leadership insight of Quick Win. I thought that's a very interesting perspective for us to hold, regardless of whether we are an individual contributor
Mm-hmm.
or in a leadership position. Yeah, that we can influence. We have the ability to influence beyond our pay grade, quote unquote.
Right.
From a business growth perspective, I love the fun to fail. Fun to fail too. I mean, really, it's a very interesting way of thinking about how to get funding, because you are
Mm.
fighting with limited resources, because the focus for her is how do we fight for the interests of the community that we are serving,
That's right.
right? And it's no different from any other business or organization. You're
Mm.
serving a community, right? In Haiying's case, she's serving the community of children with cancer right now, all right? And she's serving. So how do we fight for the interests of the community we're serving? What do we have? We have a limitation of funds. How do I get hold of funds? Everybody is doing it this way. They go in for funding by saying, this is what we're going to do, and this is what the ROI is going to be
Mm,
like,
mm,
and
mm,
this is the timeline that you're going to see. This is what you will be seeing. She
mm.
goes in and says, let me make all the mistakes. Give me money to make the mistakes so that other people don't make the mistakes, right? Yeah, and it takes a certain way of thinking about uh, a certain way of thinking about how to get to that goal, which is I need the funding to
Right.
continue serving the community, right? That's business growth.
Yep.
That's thinking. That's innovation. That's, like you said, being able to spot an opportunity and do
Mm-hmm.
something
Mm-hmm.
courageous and kind and do
Yep.
something different.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Definitely. Definitely.
So
Since
yeah.
you, oh, sorry, go on, go on, just go on.
No, sorry.
I got
Yep.
excited. Oh, okay.
Yep.
I think you've got a report from PwC, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I just want to pick that up because again, what I realized about that report was there were 9 questions, and when I was reading that, what came to my mind, hey, this is what Haiying was doing,
Oh, okay.
constantly
You want to
asking,
look at.
asking, asking. I just have a quick look, We can come back to
Okay.
it again, but I just want to. I'm sure we can drop this off for our listeners and viewers also, right? The link
Yeah.
in
Yep.
the video next week. Yeah, you see, there you go. This is from PwC, if I'm not mistaken, right, Shamini?
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
It's the PwC CEO survey. And there are 9 questions. They're divided into three categories, right? Which question do you want to draw the attention to?
Well, I think I wanted to first draw the attention to all our listeners here, right? I think it is very important for us to keep asking questions about the current, about the future, right? And how are we getting there? I think we got to keep asking those questions. I wanted to draw the attention to that first, right? I think it
Okay.
is extremely important to keep asking questions, like the way Hayin was doing at every point in time. She was not only asking questions at a personal growth level, leadership level, but even at a business level, and that I thought was extremely important. And when I was reading this report that you sent me, Sham, I was going like, hey, you see, that's what leaders need to do, right? Not just sit on the laurels and just think that everything's okay, but keep asking questions to identify the gaps. Maybe really ask the hard questions to be honest to ourselves in that sense. So I wanted to draw the attention here, and I thought all of these questions were good, right? When I was reading it, but I just wanted to draw the attention to our listeners, viewers, right? The leaders here. I think it's very, very important for us to continuously ask questions. And I've also realized that in many conversations I've had, people struggle on how to ask questions, right? But I think it's a skill that they need to start picking up, to ask questions around the context of it, asking questions around why things happen the way it does, right? What is happening today, and also ask questions about what else is possible, right? So there are ways of doing it, but I think it's important going forward from now onwards, keep constantly changing, because as we all have seen, customers' expectations are changing, employees' expectations are changing, with the tech trends that are coming in. I think we're going to see more and more changes, and we've got to keep asking questions. And that is what I took away when you sent me this question. I say, hey, this is what that leader was doing. What better quick wins than asking those right questions, right?
I'm going to
Okay.
put the link in a short while in
Sure.
the comments box. Before we go on to Chris Cummings, I'm going to say hello to John Peter Ganesan, because he was brave enough to put a comment in the comment box,
Okay.
because we have viewers who are there listening, but they don't, they're not really putting comments in the comments box. So when someone does, I'm going to say hello, and he's on a watch out for, I'm not sure, Muller is also here in a different form. So hi, Muller. She's watching out to make sure that we are doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Hi, John. Hi, John
All
Peter
right.
Gunnison.
Yes. Hello. Welcome. All right. So we have our third guest to unpack, or rather to summarize, and that's Chris Cummings.
Okay.
For me, Chris, and the things that he spoke about last week sits very firmly in the business growth segment.
Okay.
For me, while the reason he came into this space is very much about personal, it's from a personal perspective, right?
Sure.
What Chris is doing right now with his work in Wellbeing at Work world is very much about how can we put well-being as a strategic priority in
Yes.
organizations,
Yes.
right? And it's about helping organizations make well-being a strategic priority for them. And the reason he's doing that is because one, he knows it can be very difficult to do it on your own. It's very lonely, and so
Yes.
organizations need that support. It's how do we think about it, right?
Right.
And it's not about doing all those things that which we think make people happy. All right. It's not the subjective well-being that we're looking at. We're looking at long-term well-being, and we're looking at sustainable well-being, because the organization needs to be sustainable, business growth. Yeah. So his put together, and this is interesting because in the PwC survey, and also a recent report that came out from the US, talks about how can leaders, CEOs, look at well-being as something that is more strategic. Right?
Okay.
Now, how do you think about that? So, what Chris is doing is that he's come up with a framework that has 6 pillars. Now, for me, and I think for anyone who's trying to do something that's as big as well-being is, it's very, very useful when you have pillars. We have a framework to work with, because then it just makes it so easy to zero in on specific aspects of it, right? And his 6 pillars consist of leadership, connection, all right, equity, all right,
Okay.
personalization, purpose, and environment. So
Okay.
for me, it has a blend of things that are at the macro level. So things like environment, right? Things like purpose. And then you have things at a slightly narrower level, which like personalization. Like you need to have a level of personalization. It's not a blanket kind of a thing for everyone, where be it learning, be it development, be it benefits, be it what means well-being to me different to you, Ashok, right?
Yep.
And so I thought, to me, those pillars, that framework, is something that it makes it, I think, easier for organizations to then say, okay, what do we need to do for each of these areas, right? That's number one. Number two, there's a common language that we can all speak about.
Okay.
It removes well-being from that feel-good space. We are doing something good to feel good, to a serious discussion, because now it becomes strategic, right? And we all have common language to talk about it. Now, why is that important?
Okay.
Why is common language important? It's important because then we can support each other, right? It is almost like a new frontier, right? Well-being. And it's all because of the pandemic. The pandemic's just accelerated this discussion. It was coming up. It could have just taken us another 10 years or 20 years to get there. The pandemic, I think, just accelerated that discussion and brought it forward. And I think maybe many leaders are not ready to talk about that, right? They're ready from a perspective of ability, capability, or even ready in terms of maybe wanting to. Yeah. So why is it good to have common language? Then I think you can tap on each other within your network and support each other, because that's important for something that's strategic, that you have people to do that in order to grow, as a business. So that was my takeaway. And he had some wonderful nuggets in there that attach itself to the framework. The thing, though, that for me, the wow was that he talked about how this allows leaders, because you have this framework, right? And you make it, and you make it strategic, and it allows leaders to be authentic.
Okay, got it.
All right. It allows leaders to be vulnerable, perhaps. It allows leaders to maybe be more kind, or be more courageous to be kind. All right. So it was a very interesting connection that how Chris is thinking about embedding well-being in organizations, embedding it as a strategy rather than something that we do because because it's a HR thing, for example.
Right.
Or anything. Yeah.
Okay.
Over to you.
All right. So, oops, where's this guy gone? Okay, he's back. I know. Okay, so for Chris Cummings, I'm going to wear the hat now of both the agile coach and a change agent, right? Now, his key theme and message was very clear. make well-being a strategic priority. So I started thinking about that. Okay, let's make well-being a strategy. It's not going to be easy because, again, we have that issue where people think this is a feel-good, just lovey-dovey thing, kumbaya, whatever you got, But he kept emphasizing it's a strategic priority. Now, what I liked about the fact is he said, let's look at the ROI. Let's look at it from the bottom line. There are enough results. I think that was a good thing that he focused on, right?
Yep.
Because
You're right.
he was not just giving a fluffy idea, but he said, hey, this idea is based on numbers. And we can back it up. So the framework helps, but I think the numbers makes a very good business case, right? If anybody else is thinking otherwise. Right. And what I liked was he talked about what he's observing in Asia. So out of the 6 pillars that he spoke about in the framework, I'm going to focus on the very first one, leadership, right? Because leaders are the most important in driving any new initiatives. And if this is a strategic priority, it's the leaders who need to show up and demonstrate that on a day-to-day basis, not only about what they say, like what you said, right, based on the words and the language you use, but also how they act. And that is important, right? Because it will never become a strategic priority unless the leader prioritizes it and says, this is important, right? So I was very heartened to hear a few things. Number one was he said in Asia, right, in some of the forums that he was in, he said he's noticed the Asian leaders are standing up, and he said breaking the stigma. Because yes, maybe perhaps in America, in Europe, Australia, maybe people are more comfortable. Maybe this narrative has been around for some time about wellness, mental wellness, whatever it is, mental well-being and all. And I think in Asia, it has not been talked about enough. At least I know in the Singapore context, I didn't hear much about it. And yes, true. When we started to have when the pandemic came about, that's when we heard more about it. So I think pandemic had that advantage for us. It has now given permission for people to talk about it. And I'm deeply hoping that people like Chris Cummings and all start providing the tools for people so that they can work around this well-being. Because it is important to look after ourselves. So linking back to what Bara has said, right? Towards the end of his speech, he said, my last word is please look after yourselves, your mental wellness. So it's then links back to Chris, as about well-being. So again, I'm glad to hear what Chris shared, that the Asian leaders are breaking the stigma. And he also emphasized another thing. He said employee expectations are shifting, which is true. Because in the workforce, if you look at the demographics, you don't just have your Gen Z, your millennials, your baby boomers, you have right up to Gen Z, and there are different level of expectations. We're all humans in that sense. And that's why he kept emphasizing that you need to make this a strategic priority. Now, how to do it? Number one, he said, measure well-being. Just don't talk about it, measure it, measure the well-being itself, right? Act on employee survey results. He said, if you conduct all your employee survey, whatever results that you get, act on it. Don't just compile it, make sure you act on it, make sure you communicate about it, and demonstrate what you're doing about it. That's important, right? Because that's how you build a confidence, right? And he said,
can I interject
sure.
there, because it just ties into a Mercer report I read this afternoon, and it says,
Okay.
In terms of well-being, right, what works for people, and you rightly said, we have multiple generations working in the same organization,
Sure.
right? You don't know, and like he said, like Chris says, personalization. You don't know what works for not just at a generational level, but even within generations, right? So ask them. So what Mercer says is ask them. It's very simple, right? It's simple, but
That's right.
not, common sense not so common, yeah. So ask them, and like you brought up, Chris said, measure, but
Yes.
more importantly, more than measuring, do something about it.
That's
Right.
right. Do something about it. Right? Act on the employee survey results. And another thing he told us, shared with us, was he said, "Hey, you know what? If you don't want to do anything about it, look at your competitors. Are they
Yep.
focusing on well-being? Because if they are, and they are shouting about it, and they are really being authentic about it, your people are going to leave. So you're going to have retention issues, right?
Mm.
Just look at them."
Mhm.
So he gave us three ideas in the sense. He said, measure your well-being, act on your employee survey results, and look at the competitors. And he
Mm.
even gave us a quick win idea. He said, you know what? Yes, you have high performance teams in your organizations, right? Well and good, but make sure you design or build rest and recuperation activities also.
Mm.
And he said it's not about having yoga, lying down a beanbag. No, no, no. He said yes, we all will go through intense periods during our work, which is normal. We got projects and all of that, but make sure you design that rest and recuperation, whatever form it is. It can be in a group therapy, in a group form or individual form. It does not matter. But he said, make sure you deliberately build and design it. And I thought that was a very good quick win idea, right? It, you can take this idea not only because of your high performance teams that you have today, but you can do it for your teams today. Just bring on the
Yep.
idea and just make sure everyone has a rest and recuperation activity, right? And make it compulsory in that sense, so everyone takes time out. And you and I know how important it is when we are working on whether our workshops or anything that we do, right? We are very intense in building, developing, and all that, and we also need to take some time off to take a breather. It could
Yep.
be in any form. So I think it's important to do that. And I think there's a narrative that needs to seep out within the organization among leaders. So again, everything he talked about is it must be leadership led. So if you look at it from a change point of view, it has to be the leaders. It's the leaders who have to design build it, to make sure that everybody else does it. And he said, will there be challenges? He said, definitely. It's not going to be easy. He never sugarcoated it. He said it is going to be difficult. There are going to be challenges. And the way around it, he said, is to demonstrate your ROI,
Yep.
demonstrate the
And
impact from
yeah.
bottom lines, you know.
Yep. Yep.
And he said, always be authentic about well-being, because business challenges will keep increasing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just love frameworks, right? And for me, that was my biggest takeaway from it, because the framework means that, for me, framework, what does it mean? It's a process. What does the
yeah.
process mean? I can now do something
Work on
about it.
something. That's right.
Yeah, right. So ask the people, right? And don't do things just because you just don't have programs for well-being just because you either have to tick off boxes or because it's the most popular trendy thing at this point in time out there that you're listening to.
Yeah.
One framework that landed on that I came across also a couple of days ago, and I mentioned it in passing just now, was from the US. It's US centric.
Mhm.
It came out from the Surgeon General's office
Hmm.
in the US, right? And it has a framework on making workplace well-being a priority, right? I'm going to
Okay.
share this here in chat.
Nice.
It has a very interesting framework. I'll just
Okay.
show this to our viewers, and I don't I don't foresee us discussing it because I've not read it in
In
entirety
detail.
yet.
Okay. No worries.
Let me just share this. And it's got a very interesting, easy to read document
Mhm.
about what the pillars are and how they are thinking about safety, security, and all the various elements that's attached to the framework, right?
Yep.
So yeah, so that's another framework for you to to look at in terms of well-being. And if you're thinking of, if not, if you should be
You should
thinking
think
of,
about it.
making it a strategic priority for your
Mm.
organization, right? And like Hai-In said, leadership is influence. If the organization is not doing anything or not going in that direction, um, you'll rule the day. But as a leader, I think we can do something on our own for our teams. Is there something that we can do? Perhaps
Yeah.
maybe this framework might give you some ideas on what to do.
Right. And I think
Okay.
Chris also said something that tickled you and you were shouting out loud on LinkedIn also.
Sorry, what was it? Oh, what?
Work is
Work is. Now
not a
now
place
you
to,
look at me. Yeah. Work should
you
not
don't come
make
to
us
work to
sick.
be sick.
Work should not make us sick.
Yeah, work should not.
Yeah.
And I think I hope I got the pronunciation right. Devania, she says agree. I'm not sure what she
Right.
agrees, but okay, we agree too.
Okay. Thank you for
Work.
joining us, Shivanya. Nice of you to put in your comment on agreeing, and I think you put it in at that point in time that we just kind of finished off with the PwC survey, and we started talking about Chris Cummings. Okay, so quick wins, ladies and gentlemen, for this the month of January.
Mhm.
There are things that we hope we've summarized that you could take it from a personal growth perspective.
Yep.
You've got some ideas to take on from a leadership growth perspective. That's your focus. And if you're looking at it at a more macro level, from a business growth perspective, how you could take one or two of these quick wins and think about it from your organization's perspective. Yeah. So leadership is influence.
It
Right?
is influence.
Yeah, and how we influence is very much dependent on how we communicate our ideas and how we communicate our thoughts. But if you, as Ashok would say, you are a change agent and you want to impact change, then I think the three guests this month has given us quite a lot to think about in terms of how to do that. In small steps, but sure steps along the way. So yeah, that's my take for January. Ashok, do you have
Yeah.
anything to add before we close?
Yes, I think Devania has just come on again and said, I agree that young leaders are breaking the stigma. So she passionately agrees on that, which is true, which is good, and we would like to hear more from Chris also and other leaders. I think it's important. Even Bara at the end of the show, when you asked him, do you have any last things to say? He said, mental well-being. He said, do not underestimate or overestimate what people have gone through. People's headspace may have been affected, or a lot of people have been affected, have gone to the dark side. So make sure you look after yourself. And he kept banging that. And it was nice for Chris to come in at the end of January show to again emphasize that. So yes, we've got great ideas this month from quick wins from all the three leaders on how to be a better version of yourself by doing self-reflecting questions, right? By being very clear about what is your achievement versus your fulfillment, about how you bring kindness to when you develop leaders, right? How you influence others. How do you look at problems and solve the right problems by keep asking the right type of questions? And as leader, it's also about how you show up and drive results by not only being kind, but driving well-being as a important priority. Yep. So yes, great ideas this month, and I'm excited about next month.
Yes, we. So am I actually. The I don't know. I'm dabbling. We have to talk to Malar about it. To me, next month is shaping up about how people think differently, or how leaders
Nice.
are thinking differently, right? And getting results by thinking differently. So join us next month to see what is the theme that we finally settled on. But we have our guests lined up. We will be speaking to Raj first off in February, and Raj is one of two co-founders and owners of the Cage in Singapore. There's an interesting story behind that, and how they think about how they got into it and how they are in it for since 18 years now. Okay,
That's
but
right.
we'll talk to Raj about that when we come together on Thursday next week, same time, 6 p.m. Singapore time and Malaysia time.
Yep.
Until then, we leave you with quick wins for January to take on for the rest of this year.
Yep.
Kong Si Fat Chai again to our
Kong
listeners.
Hei Pak Chok.
And Happy Lunar New Year. Bye-bye,
Happy Lunar
everyone.
New Year, everyone. Bye bye, and see you all again next week. Thank you.